staff, I definitely needed extra help.
And that's why you've downloaded this workbook on recruiting the right people for your team.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Christopher Bayliss from Intergage Fast Growth. Thank you for downloading this workbook on recruiting the right people for your team, a crucially important area of growing a business. With me today is Sharon Canning. Sharon is a director of two companies. One is called Move On Rental and the other one is Landlord to Landlord Sales. Before we start this video tutorial, Sharon, for the benefit of the listener and readers, just briefly tell us about those two companies.
Yes, certainly. Move On Rentals we specialise in residential lettings throughout the whole of the Poole, Bournemouth and Sandbanks city. And Landlord to Landlord Sales is about selling tenanted properties from landlords to landlords, alleviating any void period. And we specialise throughout the UK.
Okay, so the first one is a sort of very much a niche local business, and the other one is a national business.
And both work very well together.
Okay, I think today we're going to be focusing on about your experience over the last 3 years with Move On Rentals.
Yes.
Okay, and just briefly to set this context of why this particular workbook is so important, can you just explain where you were 3 years ago in terms of number of people that you employed at Move On Rentals and how many you employ now and your recruitment experience?
Where do I start? Okay, 3 years ago I had 4 employees and I now have 9 employees. The original 4, I still have my original 4. However, the other 5, and we moved office premises, so from the 4 to 9 we grew very quickly within the space of 12 months. Of those 5 I have none, and I've replaced them probably 3 times over.
15 people.
Yes.
And so over 3 years, 15 people. How much time do you think you've been devoting to the problems of getting rid of those people and recruiting the new people out of your busy schedule?
Lots.
Define
Too
lots.
much. Oh gosh, it's more than hours, it's more than days, it's more than weeks, it's probably going into months.
Yeah.
It has to be. The process of advertising, interviewing, sifting through the CVs, even using an agency, it's so much time is involved. And then you have the time committed to bringing them into the office, training them, integrating them into the team. And then you have problems and the whole thing goes on if they don't fit. One of the things I have definitely learned as time's gone on is act quickly.
Okay. We're going to look in a minute at this particular workbook, and there are 3 or 4 hints I've got and tips to share with people who've downloaded it. But before I do, I'd like to mention a book. There's many, many books on management and business, aren't there? But there's very few on actually recruitment. And the recruitment is very much the heart of today's focus. The one I can recommend is a book, I think we can read it there, called Recruiting Excellence. Nice play on words. An insider's guide to sourcing top talent. Here in Britain, as the economy now improves, we're in a war for talent, aren't we? And how to source that top talent. That's what we need for our growing businesses. And it's written by a gentleman called Jeff Grout and another lady called Sarah Perrin. Excellent book, Recruiting Excellence. I recommend it to anybody who really wants to become much more effective in this whole area. Okay. Sharon, you've got your workbook in front of you. You've now downloaded it. I think this is all fairly fresh to you. Can you just read what you see as what I've written there as the purpose of this workbook?
Certainly. The purpose of this workbook is to assist you to create your plan to recruit the right people for your team. By successfully implementing your plan, you can dramatically increase your company's business performance and growth.
Some of the listeners will be small companies where the team is the company. Some will be much bigger companies, management teams. So it's the same principle, just at scale. So, okay. And this particular workbook, as indeed many of the others, starts with what's the problem. Well, obviously we know that in the first paragraph there it says that really successful companies and good to great companies in particular do that, have a great recruitment process. However, many don't have a good recruitment process. Perhaps I'm going to just ask you to read that second paragraph.
Other companies struggle with ineffective teams and use poor recruitment, interviewing and selection. Often business leaders in these companies spend up to 80% of their time managing the wrong people and only 20% managing their good people. In these companies, business leaders spend a lot of their precious time reworking mistakes and solving problems caused by the wrong people in their team.
Can you identify with that?
Massively, yes.
And so it says there, and indeed on most of these pages, there's often an assessment, and there is here. So on a scale 1 to 10, where 10 is outstanding and 1 is barely adequate, how do you currently rate your success in recruiting the right talented people for your team? Please put your score in below. And what are your strategic conclusions? When you're doing these workbooks, I think it's important to be kind to yourself, but also objective.
Yes.
If people score themselves 10, well, obviously they say there's no learning, but most people are a lot less than that. And the purpose of this workbook is to get you up that scale. Okay, so the second tip is on page 2, evaluate your team. So even before starting the recruitment process, you now have 9 people at Move On Rentals. Take this workbook back to base and use it to evaluate your current team. And there's 3 things really, 3 major sections here on this page 2, is how effective is your team? Things like, what are you trying to change in your company? What is the scale, importance and urgency of these changes? Okay, all those things. What are your concerns about your team? And you can see some there. And then what are the implications of these concerns? Put your comments down, draw your conclusions. So evaluate your team that you currently have, obviously, and this applies to landlord sales as well, and draw your conclusions about that. Make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Page 3 is assess your process for recruiting talented people. In my opinion, many people are very cavalier, flippant about recruitment. I don't take it seriously. It is hard work, but if you get it wrong, it costs you dear. And there's 8 tips there. And the first one I think you'd really relate to. Could you just read the first tip?
Okay, number 1, hire slowly. Take your time in recruiting, interviewing and selecting people. If you're in doubt, do not recruit. So true. So true.
And then there's 7 other tips there as well, which are all valuable. And I ask people on the right-hand side to make their assessment about each step, and draw their own conclusions. Okay, makes sense? So that's the sort of third tip, and work through that. And then the heart of this workbook is on page 4, improve your interviewing and selection, which is the heart of recruitment, isn't it? The hard facts are obviously it's a pain in the rear, pain in the bum, but put sufficient time and resources into it. And make sure you have a first-class process which you use. Obviously, if it's a small company, you'll be driving it, but as you grow, other people will be doing it. Some techniques for good interviewing and some techniques for good selection. What I'm also got, and I've given you a copy there as a separate sheet, and I'll add this to the workbook. This is from one of my clients, E.G. Coles. They sell tractors, and they were looking for a parts role. That's what it says at the top. And this is the questions that the MD asks, and he modifies this depending on the role. Some really good little questions there. And I definitely recommend to the reader and viewer that they actually create their own list of questions that they're comfortable using. They adapt it slightly because obviously you use slightly different questions, whether it's a parts person or a service person, or in your case, a negotiator or an admin person.
I just wish I had this workbook 3 years ago, Christopher. But it saved me a lot of time.
Okay. And then techniques for good selection. yeah, all good stuff. And if you're doing team interviewing, where you're interviewing, say we're interviewing somebody together, you might interview them first, I'll interview them second, and we have a common process so we can compare notes. Really, really simple stuff, but very, very powerful. Remember what we said at the beginning. This, most companies want to grow. That's why they're fast growth, particularly now the economy is moving better. We're on a war for talent, that's for sure. And your experience of having to get an additional 5 people, having to recruit 3 times as many, all the heartache and cost and hassle of that, getting better at that could have a major impact on the growth of your business.
Yes, and don't forget that it does affect the morale of the existing team in the office when you're forever turning over, and your clients. Because if your clients are saying, well, who's this? You're someone new again. That kind of can give an image that something's not right behind the scenes. When in actual fact, you have to look at yourself and say, I interviewed incorrectly to begin with. But this workbook will most certainly help.
Good. I know you've got great plans for the growth of Move On Rentals, with organic growth and possibly some acquisitions, and you've certainly got great plans for the organic growth of landlord sales, and I'm pleased that you feel this is going to be very helpful for you. May I wish you every success, and thank you for your valuable time.